All right, so I'm going to do this video because I think it's due. It's time to actually do it. I've done videos in the past that talked about the things I like about Seattle, the things I dislike about Seattle, the things I liked about Tacoma and dislike about Tacoma. I've even compared Seattle versus Portland, but I've never compared really in one video Seattle versus Tacoma. And I've lived in both Seattle and Tacoma. Now I live in Tacoma currently. Obviously, for those who are my followers, they know this. Those who are new may not know this, but I've lived here in Tacoma, bought a house, so I've lived in Tacoma actually longer by a year than I did up in Seattle. So I lived in Seattle for a little over 2 years and lived down here for a little over 3 years, right? And I can say that both cities are very similar in some aspects, but drastically different in other aspects. So let's kind of go through the two cities. A lot of times I have people who ask the question of which one should I live in, and kind of talk about the pros and cons, right? Make sure you join our Discord, which will be down in the description box below. We have a lot of different discussions that we can't really talk about so much on YouTube. So first, Seattle and Tacoma. If someone asked me today, where would I choose to live, whether it be in Tacoma or Seattle, I would choose Tacoma. And the reason why I would choose Tacoma is because I think that you have a much better quality of life. Now, people will go first and start talking about crime this and crime that. You don't hear as much now, right? I remember the first time I moved here, which again was about 3.5 years ago, let's say. A lot of folks from Seattle would talk about Tacoma and the crime, and they would talk about how it's, just one giant ghetto and it was this, that, and the other, and that's just not true. But they would just downplay Tacoma. Seattle has recently faced a lot of negatives. So the same things that they were talking about Tacoma is now affecting Seattle even more so. And you don't really hear those comments as much as you used to, right? Still, when you look at both cities, the amount of crime is not nearly as bad as it is in other places. But for people who are from here or who have lived here for a long time, the small amount of crime that you do see does unnerve a few people, right? Crime anywhere is not anything to laugh at, but it's not as bad here as in many other places that I've lived at. For example, Albuquerque by far has more crime than both Seattle and Tacoma. Indianapolis has more crime than both cities as well. So, and I also briefly lived in Cincinnati. Cincinnati has more crime than both. These are facts. But let's talk more in depth about the two. Seattle, one of the reasons why I would rather live in Tacoma versus Seattle is because of obviously the cost of living. This is not something new for people. Seattle is by far more expensive in terms of housing. It's more expensive in terms of parking. So if you have a car, not only parking as far as your job is concerned, some people, they can park where their employer allows them to park or what have you, and so there's no cost. Others have to find street parking, which can be expensive. It's hard to find parking spaces. It's a city that hasn't really expanded its footprint in so long because it really can't, but yet it's expanded its population quite a bit. So with expanded population, still small city size relative, you're going to have much more cars, and so much more cars means much more traffic and less parking spaces. So it does have those things going against it. Very small infrastructure. Some people will say that's not true. Look at the light rail system. But really, if you look at Seattle, its infrastructure is pretty small. There's not a lot of highways and interstates in Seattle. You just have I-5 going up and down Seattle. And you have a lot of semi-major roads. But as far as highways that can kind of help get you in and out of the city a little bit better, there's not a lot of those in Seattle. So you have a people either take cross city traffic. Sorry. So people either go through town and actually go on the local roads, or they get on the interstate, all of which are pretty clogged, right? So those are some of the things that are kind of taken away from Seattle. The taxes, they do have more taxes in King County, and higher taxes than what we have down here in Pierce County, whether it be property tax or whatever. So those are things that are a lot different. People will talk about schools, and I can tell you that it depends on the area and depends on the school. There are some schools here in Tacoma that are better. There are some up in Seattle that are better. You just kind of have to see. Both cities are similar in the fact that, yeah, they both have a port. They're port cities. The one down here in Tacoma is a little bit bigger. They both have quite a few different museums that you can go to, so those are tourist attractions. They both have a lot of great parks. In Seattle, they have Gasworks Park, which is really, really nice. They have a really nice zoo, Woodland Park Zoo. Down here in Tacoma, we have the Point Defiance Zoo. We have Point Defiance, which is the second largest city park in the country, only behind Central Park in New York. But we also have Dunes Peninsula, which is our newest big park that we've got open down here. So it's really, really cool. Both cities now, we have one. But both cities have a large permanent market. Pike Place Market is up in Seattle, much, much bigger. Much more interesting. And then Tacoma, we just now recently got a permanent facility for a public market. It's over there in Point Ruston. So you have a lot of similarities. We both cities have a theater district, so you can catch all different types of shows and different things like that. Again, Seattle's a big city, so you're going to have a lot more interesting big acts that go through than you do here. We both have arenas. I'm wearing the Seattle Kraken shirt, which is the new hockey team here in Seattle. But Key Arena, which is no longer Key Arena, it's now called, I don't know, Amazon bought the naming rights and they changed it to something, Emission something, I don't know. But anyway, so they both have arenas. The one in Seattle, Key Arena, holds a lot of big acts, and also it used to hold a lot of professional sports teams, and it will be holding professional sports teams in the future. Obviously, it's going through a major renovation. We also have the Tacoma Dome, which is down here in Tacoma, and it holds a lot of big acts also. So a lot of big popular concerts, small concerts are held there. So that's what I mean by both cities are similar in that aspect, right? So if you're looking for a quality of life, you're going to find it's personally more so here, because the cost of living goes into play. Tacoma seems more of a family-oriented city. Both places have a zoo. Woodland Park Zoo up there. We have Point Defiance Zoo down here. So the cities are very similar in those aspects, right? There's no other city around here that can claim that, right? So we're kind of like twin cities. So that's kind of the appeal. What makes Tacoma also a little bit further ahead, in my opinion, is that there is a lot better infrastructure. Now, no, we don't have the luxury of Sound Transit putting in a tremendous amount of infrastructure here. We don't have a lot of the light rail trains running through the city and underground and doing all that type of stuff that you see up in Seattle. But what we do have is a pretty good network of roads. So we have more highways and things like that down here than what you have up in Seattle. It's easier to get around in Tacoma because of all the different highways and things like that you won't necessarily find there. So that's a bonus. We also have a pretty decent transit system overall. Now, is it as efficient as what you see up in Seattle? No, because again, Seattle is going on the Sound Transit heavily investing there. Sound Transit has invested more in Seattle by far than any other place. Well, it's a bigger area, right? But they've also invested by far more in Bellevue than any other place also. They go where the money is, right? Now, that's not a good thing necessarily, because when you look at population and the Bellevue can't go much higher in terms of population because it's just drastically expensive to live there. Tacoma, on the other hand, you can buy almost two houses in Tacoma for the price of one in Seattle on average, almost. Here, we're still under 500,000. I think it's 400 and something thousand on average for a house. And in Seattle, it's 700 and something thousand. But and in Bellevue, it's even more than that. But the population here can grow much, much faster because there are more people who are going to qualify for housing down here. There are more people looking for housing down here. You have a lot of people coming from up north, Seattle and different places, moving down here. People from the South, California, Oregon, moving to Tacoma and other places because you're more likely to get a much more affordable house. It's going to probably look the same, if not better, than what you're going to get up in Seattle. You're going to get obviously a lot more yard, a lot more places to park, more so than you will up in Seattle. You don't have a lot of streets that are clogged with cars parking on all of the streets. That's starting to increase more here, but it's not nearly as bad as what you see up in Seattle. Every residential street I saw had cars parked bumper to bumper. You don't really see that as much down here. Now, again, that is slowly starting to change. So there's these little things, right? It's not as crowded down here. We don't have as many tourists. One of the big issues is, as a family, if you wanted to go to downtown Seattle and just enjoy the day, you're fighting crowds of people. You know what I mean? Like, you're fighting huge crowds of people. You know, we went to Pike Place Market a few times, but it became almost overbearing with the number of people that you have to kind of just, if you have little kids, you really have to hold them because they're going to get stepped on. You know what I mean? So tourism is great for the area, but it almost is overwhelming. Whereas in Tacoma, you don't really have that. Most of the tourists are from this area. You don't have a lot of people coming to Tacoma just to visit from other places typically. Most of them are going to be somewhere from the area. So you don't have as many people crowding out places as what you would have up in Seattle. So it's a lot easier to move around, get around, do things. I would also argue that our downtown, because it's smaller and more compact, it's easier to get around. Even though we don't have all of the transit systems that Seattle has, we do have the Tacoma Link, which is basically a streetcar. But it goes from the Tacoma Dome all the way up to the Theater District. Now, that's going to expand, and they're expanding it now to go into Hilltop. But it allows you to get basically from, hold on. Okay, I had a package. So, don't know exactly where I left off. But it's easier to get through Tacoma, and even downtown. You don't have as many social ills downtown in Tacoma as you do in Seattle. This is a fact. Now, people will sit and talk about, well, you can smell this and that in Tacoma. Not really. I mean, people who say there's the Tacoma aroma are still stuck in the 90s, because in the early 2000s, Tacoma has spent billions, not just to the city, but investors have literally spent billions of dollars in Tacoma, and you don't really have a lot of the same things that you had there before. So a lot of the waterfront has been cleaned up. And so a lot of the issues, and even currently where the Dunes Peninsula used to be where they used to dump a whole lot of it was a toxic dump site, right? So they fixed all of that. The smelter's gone, all those things are gone, and now you have a city that's becoming on its own, right? So there's a lot to do. If you are someone who's really into jogging and you're athletic, you can actually jog all the way from downtown all the way out to the zoo, along the waterfront and everything else. It's really, really cool. They put up a nice pedestrian bridge where you can go across from one side, which is where the waterfront is, over into Point Defiance and over into the zoo if you wanted to. And then you have all the trails of Point Defiance. So you don't have that anyplace else in the Pacific Northwest in terms of a city. You just don't have that. So there are a lot of things that Tacoma has when you're looking at the cost of living, when you look in terms of housing and taxes, everything else. You also have more opportunities to park. Most places don't charge you for parking. In terms of apartment complexes, downtown, there's still a lot of free places. You have to look for them. But you still have that. We have huge garages that don't charge. Sound Transit actually has built some garages that we actually have. You still can get to and from Seattle if you wanted to pretty easily. Again, if you go downtown in Tacoma, right there in the Dome District, you have the Sounder commuter train, which is the South Line. It's the busiest of the two, and it can take you Monday through Friday up to Seattle. We also have express buses, which the bus hub is also in that same general area, and it can take you directly to Seattle without a problem, or Olympia. Now, the express buses don't take you there, but Olympia, they have their own bus service that comes up to Tacoma and brings people back and forth. So, to be honest with you, it is much easier. And I've talked to a lot of people who say Tacoma is more my speed than Seattle. It's just more my speed. Seattle is just busy, and big, right? Excuse me, coffee's getting me. Whereas Tacoma is not outrageously big. It's more comfortable. You're still in a city. There's things to do, but it's not excessively big. The arts community. One of the things that Tacoma has started to edge out Seattle is in the arts. And I'm not talking like just painting, but I'm talking about just art in general. Tacoma Creates is a huge investment that the city and the people who live here invested in. It was on a ballot, and we've invested millions into this. So that encourages various different art programs. That's something that Seattle does not have. So things like that have actually put the city ahead in many different aspects, right? So it's becoming a much more desirable place. So when we talk about Seattle versus Tacoma, in my opinion, it's going to be Tacoma. When I said Seattle versus Portland, I chose Seattle because I felt like Seattle has a lot of great things that Portland doesn't have. Sure, Portland has a better transit system. Some would argue that it's not as good because everything's above ground and there's traffic and different things like that. But it does cover a lot more territory than what Seattle has. Now, that's going to change, obviously, because Seattle is, creating East Link, and that's going to be great. But again, one of the issues is if you look at Portland itself, you can access many different parts of the city. They have a very complete streetcar system. So they've done really, really good with that, as well as their light rail system. So that's good. Seattle has dropped the ball because of the lack of support for the streetcar system in terms of some of the city leadership. Had they actually stuck to that, then I would say, yeah, we would be right up there in terms of Seattle. Tacoma, on the other hand, I think is doing really, really good in terms of transit. It could be a lot better, but it's doing pretty good. They're going to construct a BRT line, which will connect north to south. Now, we've been having a lot of east to west type things, basically Tacoma Dome over into downtown. You have the light rail system, the streetcar. But you don't have a lot of east to west or north to south style transit. So the BRT is going to go down Pack Avenue, and that's going to literally link a lot of our suburbs. So Spanaway, Parkland, Midland are going to be connected all the way into downtown Tacoma. So that's going to be a good thing. And they're hoping to expand and have more BRT systems. So, yeah, I mean, personally, I would choose Tacoma. Seattle does pay more in terms of jobs, obviously. But again, it's going to cost you more to live there. So you do have a lot of people. And I would say go to the parking garage that's right there in the Dome District. It's 2 huge garages. They hold thousands of cars. But you can look and see that it gets crowded, because every morning you have commuters who literally get either take the express bus up, which Noelle did quite a bit, or they take the Sounder commuter train up to Seattle. And that is the reason why it's one of the busiest. It is the busiest of the two Sounder lines, because a lot of people live down here and work up in Seattle. So they're making Seattle money, but they're bringing it back down here. And some people say that's a great thing. However, it adds to the pressure on the rail system and on the road system. And that's why you have such a traffic nightmare coming from the south up into Seattle. Really, any direction, you're going to have a traffic nightmare. But that's the reason why. So they're trying to actually get more investment down here, more companies down here. There are different projects going on to do that. There's a lot of private companies that are actually starting to invest in that type of aspect. So they're trying to encourage local tech startups to form here. They're offering them money and space and different things like that. The city also has offered a head credit. So basically, Seattle wants to do the head tax, but Tacoma, the city, is offering a credit for every employee that makes over 60 grand. So there are things that Tacoma is doing to try to lure bigger companies down here. But still, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to more places to go for college, Seattle wins. It wins. And if you don't mind the commute, then yeah, live in Tacoma. But so when people say what's going to be best for you, I always ask, it depends. It depends on where you are in your life. It depends on what's important to you. In terms of myself and Noelle and our kids, I would say Tacoma. In terms of Blasian relationships, interracial relationships, you'll see by far more of them down in Tacoma than you will up in Seattle. Not that you won't see them in Seattle, you do. Obviously, you see a lot, but you're going to see more down here than you would up in Seattle. So some people have asked that question too, because they've asked, well, what about, because you guys are in a Blasian relationship, how is that fair in Tacoma? And there's a lot of them in Tacoma. To be honest with you, there's a lot. There's and if you look at Seattle from the lens of some other place, people coming to Seattle are like, there's a lot of Blasian couples up in Seattle. But when you compare the two cities, Tacoma kind of beats that just based on visual. I don't have actual metrics and statistics, but just on visual, Tacoma wins in that area. But anyhow, I can go on and on and on. My choice would be obviously Tacoma for many different reasons. Both are great cities. Both have their own issues that they're dealing with separately and also jointly as well. You really and truly have to decide what's going to be best for you, what neighborhood out of those cities are going to be best for you as well. If those cities aren't appealing to you, there are suburbs that you can definitely take a look at. They have their pros and cons as well, obviously. And again, no place is perfect. But hope you guys enjoy this video. Make sure you join our Discord, join the discussion there. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you. Take care.